Now that you have assumed leadership, you are expected to define reality. One critical gift and ability that makes for great leadership is the ability to define reality. As a leader, you are responsible for framing reality for the group that you lead. You must frame reality for your organization, your family, or your nation. And in the framing of this reality, it's one, you define its situation. Where are we as an organization? What's the current situation? You specify its aims. You articulate your organization, family, or nation's choices. So, one, you define your organization situation. Two, you specify the aims. Three, you articulate your organization, family, or nation's choices. Four, as a leader, you tell us where we are and where we are going in a way no satellite navigation system could. In other words, you tell it in such a way that we can feel it, we can touch it, we can taste it. And of course, fifth, you should show us the map and the destination and help us see why we should choose this route and not that. This is one of the leader's most magisterial roles. What has defining reality got to do with leadership? Well, a leader understands that the meaning of events is never self-evident. It is always subject to interpretation. So your role as a leader is to define the reality and what needs to happen in order to move everyone in a common direction. Sometimes, out of folly or fear or failure of imagination for that matter, leaders get it wrong. And in politics, we have the example of Neville Chamberlain, British Prime Minister. He defined the challenge of the rise to power of Nazi Germany as the search for peace in our time. And it took Winston Churchill to realize that this was wrong and that the real challenge was the defense of liberty against tyranny. We have examples, of course, of other leaders also that failed to define reality. And we see that in business, we have IBM and their failure to harness Windows, leading to the establishment of Microsoft. Then there was Kodak and their failure to harness the digital camera. An example of how a leader's ability to define reality and frame reality can change the course of a nation is former US President Abraham Lincoln. In Abraham Lincoln's day, there were a number of people for slavery and against slavery. And it took Lincoln to define the abolition of slavery as the necessary step to the preservation of the Union. It was that larger vision that allowed him to say in his second inaugural, with malice towards none, with charity for all, with firmness in the right as God gives us to see the right. Let us strive on to finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds. So he allowed neither abolition of slavery itself or the end of the Civil War to be seen as a victory for one side over the other, but instead defined it as a victory for the nation as a whole. We see again that genius in 1994. It took Nelson Mandela to define and frame the reality for South Africans. South Africa was sitting on a knife's edge. There was a real possibility for civil war. And Nelson Mandela allowed neither side of the conflict to claim victory. But he defined a rainbow nation for all races, leading to his speech, "I have fought against white domination, and I have fought against black domination." He envisaged a non-racial, non-sexist South Africa, which would be home for all. See, a leader understands that our lives are determined not by what happens to us, but by how we respond to what happens to us. And how we respond depends on how we interpret the events. Is this disaster the end of my world? Or is it life calling me to exercise heroic strength so that I can survive and help others to survive? The same circumstances may be interpreted differently by two people, leading one to despair and the other to heroic endurance. The facts may be the same, but the meanings are diametrically different. How we interpret the world affects how we respond to the world. And it is our responses that shape our lives individually and collectively. That is why your first responsibility as a leader is to define reality. Within every family, every community, every organization, and every nation, there are trials, tests, and tribulations. The question is, do these lead to arguments, blame, and recrimination? Or does the group see them providentially as a path to some future good? Or will the group work together to meet the challenge? Much, perhaps all, will depend on how the group defines its reality. This in turn will depend on the leadership or absence of leadership that it has had until now. Strong families, strong communities, strong organizations, and strong nations have a clear sense of what their ideals are, and they're not blown off course by the winds of change. The question is, 1, whose are we? 2, where are we? 3, what are we trying to achieve? And what kind of people, organization, family, or nation do we aspire to be? These are the questions leaders help the group to ask and answer. And when a group does so together, it is blessed with exceptional resilience and strength. As Shakespeare said, "Be not afraid of greatness. Some are born great, some achieve greatness, and others have greatness thrust upon them." Remember, leadership is a burden, a privilege, and a responsibility. If you are enjoying these videos, please just go on to YouTube and subscribe. And also